Antarctica's late summer sun hung low over the ice shelf, casting long pale shadows across a landscape carved by thousands of years of wind. Snow ripples stretched to the horizon like frozen ocean waves, sculpted by katabatic gusts that had shaped the continent since before human memory. But today, the wind was silent. Not calm, silent. Air in Antarctica always moved. It whistled across ice cliffs, roared down slopes, screamed between crevasses. But now it lay heavy and unmoving, as if the world's lungs had stopped. Alone a daily penguin, small but determined, climbed a snow ridge with stiff, purposeful steps. Researchers had tagged him last season and named him Needle, for the sharp, neat shape of his tail feathers. He had survived leopard seals, skua raids, and storms that drove whole colonies inland. But never silence. Needle paused at the crest, tilting his head. Penguins sense wind through their feathers, their skin, even their bones. The absence felt wrong. Too clean. Too empty. Below him lay the rookery, tens of thousands of penguins milling, honking, shifting chicks between feet. But even their calls seemed muffled, as if the air refused to carry sound properly. A few hundred meters away, Dr. Carol Lindstrom, a polar climatologist, lifted a small anemometer. 0 wind speed, she said softly. In Antarctica. In late summer. Her assistant, Oscar Velt, squinted through salt-frozen eyelashes. Maybe the device. It's not the device, Kara said. Look at the snow. The snow at their feet was smooth. Too smooth. Fresh ice crystals usually danced on the surface even in faint breezes, but now the surface lay untouched, a flawless crust. Needle wobbled forward again, pushing through powder that should have drifted, should have moved, should have sung when touched. But the wind had lost its voice. And Antarctica had never been so quiet. By midday, the silence deepened. Needle approached a shallow gully where cold air normally pooled and funneled, creating whistling drafts that helped penguins judge weather shifts. But as he slid down the slope, no gust caught him, no snow plume spun beside him. He chirped uneasily, a small, clipped sound swallowed by the world. Kara and Oscar hiked toward an array of meteorological instruments half buried in rime ice. The solar panels glinted in dull sunlight, but the spinning cups of the wind gauge sat motionless. Oscar tapped one. It clunked. No response. Kara brushed her glove across the snow surface. There should be sastrugi everywhere, she said. Those long ridges carved by wind. But they're flattening. Indeed, shapes that had taken months to form were slumping, softening, as if sculpted by a hand made of warm breath rather than freezing air. Oscar looked around. How long since the last real gust? 76 hours, Kara replied. And that's unprecedented. Closer to the coast, giant tabular icebergs floated like trapped planets. Melt pools mirrored the sky with eerie stillness. Needle could see them from his ridge, shimmering blue scars in the white world. He shuffled along the crest, stopping to glance upward. Clouds hovered low, heavy, unmoving, like a ceiling expecting orders that never came. Without wind, nothing cycled. Moisture stalled. Temperature gradients collapsed. Needle's instincts prickled. Penguins relied on the rhythm of air as much as the rhythm of sea and ice. A silent world was an unpredictable one. Down in the rookery, parents shuffled uneasily. Chicks peeped nervously. Skuas circled wide, confused by the lack of updrafts. Oscar pointed to a snowflake drifting past him. Look at that. It floated perfectly straight downward, as if guided by an invisible thread. No wobble. No spin. Kara's brow furrowed. Air density is wrong. Movement is wrong. Something is inhibiting convection entirely. And if convection stops, Oscar added, then weather stops. Needle crossed the ridge further, feeling a pressure deep in his chest. The kind penguins sense before storms, except no storms came. Something held the atmosphere in place. Something big. Something unseen. And the wind still refused to speak. By late afternoon, the silence became more sinister. Sound traveled strangely. Calls didn't echo. Footsteps on crusted snow sounded muted, as if the world were wrapped in thick wool. Needle slid down a small ice ramp, landing with a soft thud. His usual chirp bounced off nothing. Even nearby penguins seemed subdued, their vocalizations shortened, swallowed. He approached a patch of thin ice where meltwater pooled. Usually the surface rippled from constant breezes, but now it reflected him perfectly, still and mirror smooth. Needle tapped the surface with his beak. The ripple spread. Slowly. Too slowly. Oscar noticed the same phenomenon. He dropped a pebble into a melt hole. The water quivered as though reluctant to react. Kara. The surface tension changed. Kara ran the numbers on her handheld tablet. Air pressure is normal. Humidity is stable. Temperature gradient near zero. She paused, and her voice tightened. The boundary layer is locked. The what? The lowest part of the atmosphere, it's stuck. Not circulating. Not mixing. It's like the air has thickened. Or frozen in place. Oscar swallowed. Is that possible? No, she said. Which means something is forcing it. Needle turned toward the sea. Usually, katabatic winds roared down from the inland plateau by late afternoon, sending sheets of snow flying. But the fjord remained still. Even the penguins near the waterline stood confused, unused to such quiet oceans. He waddled closer. The air near the water tasted strange, metallic, dense. He shook his head, unsettled. Back at camp, Kara typed rapidly into her log. 3 days without wind. Atmospheric stagnation increasing. Sound propagation reduced. Boundary layer stability unnatural. Oscar hugged his arms against the cold, not because of temperature, but because of dread. What could cause this? Kara didn't answer immediately. Then she whispered, if the atmosphere can't rise. Then Antarctica just became a giant pressure trap. Needle looked out over the silent sea. And for the first time in his short life, he felt fear not of predators or storms, but of stillness. On the 4th day, the ice began to speak. Needle awoke before dawn, startled by a faint vibration under his feet. Not a quake, Antarctica knew quakes well. This was subtler, like distant thunder muffled beneath tons of frozen ocean. He climbed the snow ridge again, scanning the horizon with bright, alert eyes. The sky glowed faint orange. Clouds stretched thin, unmoving but trembling faintly. The ridge beneath him trembled too. Far off, an enormous ice cliff, a section of the continental shelf, cracked audibly. A rolling boom spread across the flats, but the sound died quickly, swallowed by the thickened atmosphere. Kara and Oscar sprinted from their tent. That was calving. Oscar cried. But it wasn't caused by waves or storms, Kara said, breathless. It was internal pressure. Needle stared at the distant plume of ice dust. Another tremor rolled beneath him. He crouched low. Penguins understood ice intimately. It spoke in groans and pops and sighs. But this vibration was different, rhythmic, pulsing, like a heartbeat under the crust. Kara placed her palm on the ground. It vibrated steadily. Oscar. It's synchronized. With what? The atmospheric pulses. Oscar's pupils widened. The air and ice are feeding back into each other. Kara nodded slowly. Locked systems do that. When neither can release energy, pressure builds on both sides. Needle looked up at the sky. For the first time, he saw movement. Not wind, compression. The clouds seemed squeezed from above and below, as though the sky and earth were pushing inward toward each other. The wind wasn't silent anymore. It was trapped. The ridge beneath Needle shuddered. A thin crack zipped across the surface. He hopped aside just as the snow gave way, forming a small fissure. Kara's voice trembled. Needle's ridge is destabilizing. The ice sheet is responding to atmospheric compression. Oscar stared at the instruments. Pressure is climbing. Slowly but continuously. And when it reaches threshold, Kara whispered, the ice shelf would purge the pressure. Violently. Needle waddled quickly down the ridge, calling sharply. Penguins nearby echoed him, moving away from the growing fissure. The ridge cracked again, louder this time. A warning. The silent world was preparing to scream. The purge began at twilight. Needle sat near the rookery edge, huddled with other penguins as the ground hummed beneath them. The sky shimmered faintly, not with auroras, but with distortions of compressed air. Kara and Oscar stood between instrument towers, scanning pressure readings that climbed with every passing minute. Aileen Cordell reported something similar on the prairie last year, Kara said. A landmass holding pressure until it finally exhaled. But this is Antarctica, Oscar whispered. If it exerts a release, it will involve ice. And wind. A lot of wind. The first sign was subtle. Snow dust lifted straight upward in thin lines. Then it hung suspended, motionless. Then, it dropped instantly, as if gravity remembered itself. Needle chirped in alarm. The ground pulse accelerated. Ice groaned. Clouds compressed further. The air thickened to the point that even snowflakes struggled to fall. Kara stepped back. It's happening. The continent inhaled. For one endless second that stretched across the frozen world, everything held still. Then Antarctica exhaled. A blast of wind erupted from the inland plateau, roaring across the ice in a white wall of force. Katabatic winds screamed to life, tearing across the shelf at hurricane speed. Snow exploded into the air. Flags whipped violently. The frozen sea heaved against itself. Needle flattened his body, bracing as the wind howled past him, strong enough to lift smaller penguins off their feet. But he did not flee. He felt relief. The world was speaking again. Kara grabbed a rope line and shouted over the roar. The boundary layer broke. The atmosphere is venting pressure. The wind howled with the fury of 4 days' silence. It scoured ridges. It toppled light equipment. It roared through valleys like a freed animal. But it was wind. It was movement. It was life. After nearly an hour, the gusts softened. The air warmed slightly, normal Antarctic warmth, not the stagnant, suffocating stillness of before. Needle stood, feathers ruffled, eyes bright. He climbed the ridge again, feeling the breeze tug gently at his cheeks. The wind had found its voice. Kara looked out across the landscape with awe and unease. The system corrected itself, she said. It restored circulation. But if it stalled once, Oscar murmured, it can stall again. Needle chirped once, a clear, ringing note carried easily on the breeze. The silence had ended. But Antarctica had changed. And somewhere deep in its frozen heart, still resonating in faint pulses beneath the snow, the memory of a windless world waited. Just in case the wind ever forgot its voice again. For 2 days after the Great Purge, Antarctica felt almost normal again. The wind blew, sharp, clean, familiar. Snow drifted in swirling sheets, hissing against ice ridges. Penguins waddled in purposeful lines, relieved to hear the air move around them. Yet something beneath the surface had not settled. Needle sensed it first. He stood atop a ridge overlooking the rookery, feathers sleeked tightly against the wind. The breeze carried scents of salt and ice, reassuring, but beneath that, something else lurked. A faint vibration in the ground. An echo of the stillness that had nearly smothered the continent. He cocked his head. The wind blew normally, but the sound felt thinner. Kara and Oscar had not slept more than a few hours. Their instrument tents buzzed with constant recalibrations, readings flickering with anomalies that refused to stabilize. Oscar frowned at the barometric graph. The pressure oscillation never returned to baseline. Kara rubbed her forehead. The purge didn't reset the atmosphere, it only forced a temporary correction. Meaning the trap could form again? She nodded grimly. Needle hopped down from the ridge and waddled toward the sea. The wind pushed at him, but lightly, inconsistently. It stuttered. Wind didn't stutter. He squawked softly. Down at the shoreline, waves lapped with unnatural uniformity. No chop. No uneven crests. Almost synchronized. Needle approached the water, tapping the edge with his beak. The cold tasted normal. But the air above it did not. He glanced upward. Clouds drifted, but too slowly. As if moving through a thicker medium. Kara lifted her face to the breeze and frowned. Do you feel that? Oscar nodded. Wind density changed again. No, Kara whispered. The wind is weakening. The instruments agreed. Wind speed, dropping. Atmospheric mixing, slowing. Pressure layer, tightening again. Needle looked up sharply. The ridge behind him, the one that cracked during the purge, trembled. A small plume of powdered snow burst upward. Not from wind. Not from impact. From something pushing up underneath. Kara sprinted toward the fissure. The ice shelf is shifting again. Oscar followed. But we just had a purge, shouldn't pressure be dropping? It did. Kara shouted over the growing hum beneath the ice. But something underground is repressurizing the system. The snow-ridged needle had climbed earlier groaned, bending slightly, not breaking this time, but flexing like a strained muscle. Penguins nearby began calling frantically. Entire groups turned inland, away from the coast, sensing danger before any human could measure it. Needle froze, listening. A low-frequency rumble rolled beneath the ice, too deep to be heard by humans but perfectly felt by penguins. It vibrated through his chest. Through the snow. Through the frozen sea. The wind weakened further. Snow drifted less. Sound dulled again. The silence was trying to return. And this time, it was returning faster. By the next dawn, the world had split in two. Above the snow, a light, sickly breeze that struggled to circulate. Clouds drifting as if in slow motion. Sound flattening again. Below the snow, a deep, rhythmic pressure rising. Ice layers shifting in stacked waves. A low hum, growing louder by the hour. Antarctica was at war with itself. Needle stood with a group of Adelies near the rookery edge. The birds shuffled nervously, turning their heads rapidly, a telltale sign of atmospheric imbalance. Chicks peeped in distress, and adults tightened their protective huddles. He hopped atop a chunk of ice and chirped sharply, urging the younger penguins inland. They listened. Instinct recognized danger even humans struggled to define. Kara and Oscar reviewed new seismic data inside their tent. Oscar pointed at the graph. Look, pressure waves coming from beneath a firn layer. It's like the ice shelf is expanding and contracting. Kara's face paled. That means trapped air pockets. Rebuilding pressure? No, she whispered. Redistributing it. Needle waddled toward the old fissure on the ridge. It had stabilized after the purge, but now, faint cracks spiderwebbed outward again, branching like frost patterns but deeper and more deliberate. He tapped a crack gently with his beak. The ground vibrated back. He jerked away in alarm. The ice responded. Kara and Oscar reached the ridge moments later and froze in place. The entire slope of the ridge was breathing, rising slightly, sinking slightly, in a slow, steady rhythm. Oscar whispered, horrified, it's synchronizing with the atmospheric pulses. Kara nodded. The ice and air are locked again. But why? Oscar asked. Why doesn't the system return to normal circulation? Kara stared at the ridge, at the stillness creeping across the horizon, at the way even the wind seemed hesitant. Because something is preventing upward convection, she said. Heat exchange can't occur. Cold air isn't falling. Warm air isn't rising. So Antarctica is a sealed chamber, she finished. Again. A sudden boom echoed across the flats. Needle threw himself flat as a massive slab of ice, far out on the shelf, fractured. A plume of snow shot into the sky, then hovered, suspended unnaturally before slowly drifting down. Oscar stared. No wind again. No mixing, Kara corrected. The purge didn't fix the cause. Needle scrambled to his feet, calling loudly. The penguins gathered behind him, looking to him without understanding why. Another tremor shook the ridge. Another slab cracked in the distance. Another gust of wind attempted to form, then died mid-blow. Kara looked across the white expanse, skin crawling. The wind is losing its voice again, she whispered. Oscar swallowed hard. And next time, the purge might be stronger. Needle watched the horizon, feathers bristling. He didn't know what caused the silence. He didn't know that the atmosphere was failing to circulate. He didn't know air mechanics or pressure traps. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. Antarctica never went quiet twice without consequence. And the second silence was coming faster than the first.